Hi, I'm Holly. I write and teach the Bible studies here at Study with Friends. My background in this is a combination of formal education and my own personal study of the Word. I infuse perspectives from different systematic theologies when I think that would be helpful in rounding out our understanding of the text. But for the record, my formal education is from a Reformed theological seminary. I strongly believe that we should all understand the background of anyone who's teaching us about the Bible. So if you'd like, you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. This is a group of real women doing Bible study and life together, and we're really glad you're here. Anything else you want to lift out of Deuteronomy 17? Generally speaking, because we're going to go.
Yeah, just interesting that he says, do not go back to Egypt to get horses. If you're going to, you're not to acquire many horses, but don't go back to Egypt. Like, I don't want you going backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The horses thing, again. Okay, let me explain it. Horses, what that really means, it's not about just riding for pleasure.
Right.
Having a lot of horses, do you know what that would represent?
Your strength, your ability to fight.
Your ability to engage your troops. And so what he's saying is don't amass strength in a worldly way. Remember that your strength comes from me. And in Judges, we see that again and again. In Joshua, we see it. So here we're seeing this in Deuteronomy. In Judges and in Joshua, we see miraculous ways. And a lot of scholars call God the divine warrior in those books because it is through him that victory is had. And he makes that very clear. He leaves no question about whose victory each of these battles belongs to. And so really miraculous things like the sun stayed still in the sky or the walls just came down or in the case of Gideon, they just broke pots and blew trumpets and these are and their enemies were thrown into confusion, which by the way is word for word what God says will happen. Your enemies will be thrown into confusion. And so we have to take this work of Deuteronomy that God is building this foundation, so that they'll know when they're right and wrong, and B, because God is across all time, he already knows what's going to happen. And in the end, they sit in exile. And of course, the question is going to be, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did we who were so elect of God become so just shamed that we were defeated and exiled from our own land? And so this is how that happened. And so God is leaving no question about why and how it's going to go. And when you look back, hindsight is so much clearer. And when Israel looks back and when we look back, how did this happen? So the one thing that I want to lift out, especially of Deuteronomy 17, is verse 14. And I'm asking you if you see any hints in there about what Israel was asking for and why. So just stay in 14. Kathy, would you read it for us again?
Sure. When you enter the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you take possession of it and live in it, and you say, I will appoint a king over me like all the nations who are around me.
Okay. What was Israel asking for? Don't overthink it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. No, when the homework is this dense,
they want to be
like, wait a minute, what is she really asking?
Right. They want to be like the nations.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why they asked for a king. Now, why would that be wrong?
Because they're set apart.
That's right. Say it louder.
They're set apart.
They're
not like the other
supposed to
nations.
not be like the other nations. The whole point of electing Israel was what? You were here for the Pentateuch. I'm looking at you.
They're God's people.
Yep. And what were they supposed to accomplish in
They're supposed to display that to all the other
Yeah.
nations around them.
Yes. To show the nations around them who God was and that he was. And God had all kinds of great plans of how he was going to let these people experience great blessings and great victories so that he could be glorified. Mm-hmm. But what they wanted was to be like everybody else, like a middle schooler, right?
That's true.
They just wanted to be like everybody else.
Blend in. Don't stand out.
Yes. Don't stand out. But God said, I've chosen you to stand out. So stand out. And And frankly, it's not about you. It's about me. And they forgot that. They abandoned that. Okay, so great. So now we understand why it was wrong for them to ask for a king, right? Did we really get it?
Yep.
Don't let me talk you into it.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. Okay, so I think we can then skip into our book right now, which is Samuel. And I'm going to ask you just from the homework. Can someone read? I know that I didn't assign this to anyone in advance, but can someone read just 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 12? 1 Samuel 12, verse 12. I'm just hitting this more on the nose. So what I asked was, how does this passage show us the sin of Israel in asking for a king? So let's read it. 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 12.
I have it if you want me to read it.
Great, thank you.
If I have the right one. And when you saw that Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, came against you, you said to me, no, but a king shall reign over us, when the Lord your God was your king.
Okay, so thank you. This is Samuel talking to Israel, annoyed. And what is he saying? What is this? How does this show us the sin of Israel in asking for a king? We're just putting a sharper point on what we already said, so don't overthink it.
God was already their king.
Yeah.
And they wanted a physical representation.
Right.
They wanted somebody else.
You know what a little bit reminds me of is the debacle at the base of the mountain of Sinai, that they needed something to focus their worship on. And so they made this golden calf. And again, that was an episode of syncretism. A lot of people think that was, they began to worship, but they just wanted something to represent. It was an adding on to of their faith, not a dispelling their faith in God, but an adding something that made more sense to them, that made them more comfortable. Let's be honest, it made them more comfortable. And so this reminds me of that. They wanted a king that they could see.
That's what I keep putting. It's tangible. They want something tangible.
Tangible is
and
a
even
great
now,
word.
I feel like we want something tangible, right? So this is this pie in the sky out there, God, but we want something literally right in front of us. Because I hear all the time people say, wouldn't it have been great if God actually spoke to you? I'm like, he barely spoke to anybody then. And we have the Holy Spirit inside of us, but it's not tangible. We can't feel it, taste it, touch it. And so, I agree with you because I'm in the book of Exodus. And so I had that ability to read the golden calf again. And it doesn't say they turned from God, but they added that extra
they wanted
piece
something
they
that was more,
to see something in front of them.
Maybe, which I don't even want to say more real, because he was so real to them, parting the seas. But this just shows us our own humanness. Like I always say, don't point your finger at Israel and say what a mess they were. Point your finger at yourself and say, how am I like Israel? That's another way, Kathy, just a tactic to use as you read through the Old Testament to help you stay grounded. Instead of saying, look at what a mess they were, ask God to show you, how does this show me myself? What do you want me? Why did you write this whole story for me and preserve it for me to be able to read it today? And what is exactly that you want me to see and hear and know and understand from it? Thank you for saying that. Okay, Nicole, can I ask you to read so we keep coming back to Deuteronomy, and we're going to keep doing that. Deuteronomy 31, verses 14 to 22.
Sure.
Thanks.
And the Lord said to Moses, behold, the days approach when you must die. Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tent of meeting, that I may commission him. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting. And the Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud. And the pillar of cloud stood over the entrance of the tent. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers. Then this people will rise and whore after the foreign gods among them in the land that they are entering. And they will forsake me and break my covenant that I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be devoured. And many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, have not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day, because of all the evil that they have done, because they have turned to other gods. Now therefore write this song and teach it to the people of Israel. put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the people of Israel. For when I have brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, which I swore to give to their fathers, and they have eaten and are full and grown fat, they will turn to other gods and serve them, and despise me and break my covenant. And when many evils and troubles have come upon them, this song shall confront them as a witness, for it will live unforgotten in the mouths of their offspring. For I know what they are inclined to do even today, before I have brought them into the land that I swore to give. So Moses wrote this song the same day and taught it to the people of Israel.
Okay. So we'd actually dealt with this passage earlier, but I would like you now, and this is really going to be out of your homework if you did this. I hope you did it. Take the broader context of 1 Samuel, the entire chapter 12, and tell me if you were able to do any compare and contrast with the passage that Nicole just read, and just give me your thoughts on that.
I said that chapter 12 is like a meta fulfillment of the prophecy in Deuteronomy. It's like it shows the conditions of the Israelites' hearts and their spirits, like due to their turning away from God, rather than just summarizing their unfaithful actions. It like goes further into this is where they were at during it, and this is where they're at now, kind of like the meme you referenced earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And
how it started, how it's going.
Yeah, like instead of just saying like, oh, you did this, it's like you did this and this is how your heart is like broken through that. And like this is, I think it was 12, I think it was verse 12 that says, yeah, no, I'm thinking of something else. There was a verse in here that like summarizes the whole chapter well, and that's, I wish I remembered what it was, but it was one of those verses that got me to the idea that it's like it's showing the fulfillment of the prophecy, but not just by like giving the narrative, but by actually like showing what was within their brains and their hearts.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you, Bella. Perfect. Anything else you guys want to add on that? I see you wrote words on your paper. Share your words.
I was just thinking God commissioned Joshua instead of where they are demanding a king or asking for a king. God already had a succession plan. He already knew
That's good.
who was going to be the next one when Moses lies down with his fathers. You know, and I don't know. I think if I was Moses to hear, you're going to lie down with your fathers. Like, I think I would try to make this conversation last a long time.
Well, he did have that long speech. He had a lot to say at the end.
I just, you're okay. It's imminent.
Yeah.
You know, that's.
Oh, he was probably tired. He was probably ready.
Maybe.
He was very old.
Maybe. It's still the unknown, you know.
Yeah.
I guess just thinking, okay, now Joshua's going to take over. And
so a very clear succession plan. That's a really good way of saying it.
He already had it figured out.
And he had Joshua, was young and able-bodied, where Moses, certainly could have been capable of leading them into the promised land. But, God had a plan to get them into the land, to have the military victories. And there's a difference between a military leader and a king who is to reign over a peaceful. We are in the land and we are dwelling in the land. It's a bit of a different shade of different character on that leadership, right? Like Joshua was basically a military leader. He was a strategist. He listened to God, but then he led the nation into these strategic battles, and listening to God 100%. Different kind of leadership though. A different time in the nation.
Tune.
Yes,
very in tune.
Yeah, a good leader.
Yeah.
Joshua was a good leader. Moses was a good leader. Okay, you have some words on your page too.
Yeah, I think what I just found interesting between the two of them, and I sort of went off the people, because obviously we see there's fulfillment here, and I said it's the spiral. They start forsaking God, but then I have in here what I find interesting is that they're forsaking God, His overall leadership, and yet they're asking Him for a leader. So they're trusting that He's going to give them a leader, but they're like, this is what we want, so put into place what we want, even though we should really just want you. So I find it fascinating that they trusted him enough to give him a good leader, and yet they didn't trust God enough to be the ultimate leader.
Yeah.
And so it's just people, the way that we think.
Yes, I was going to ask you to make that personal, but I will say that I'll try to make it personal. I'll be transparent. One of the ways that shows up for me a lot is in the leadership of this ministry. And I often say, so I also run a software company, and the difference between what I do here in the ministry is if I need to, as I run the software company, I have people who are above me who I can call and be like, what do you think I should do? I mean, ultimately, I'm in charge, of the day to day. But if I run into something, I have people I can go to, and physical people who I can call, or I use Slack or whatever. And I say, what do you think I should do? Or this is what I was thinking. Do you see any downsides? And I even talk to my team about that. I say, humans, it's helpful to have someone who answers you with a human voice. Mm-hmm. And in the ministry, at the end of the day, I don't have that. I have a council, I have a board that I go to, and we talk things through. And I think that's biblical. Mm-hmm. That's why we do it that way. And we make sure that we all are listening to God, and we pray about something. We actually just prayed about something this week. We took a vote yesterday via text, and I am going to text them today because they all said yes, but it was not a resounding yes to this thing that we were considering doing. I said, I think I'm going to tell them today, I think we need to just wait it out a little bit more, because I think we have to have sureness that God is leading us in this next direction. And I didn't feel that sureness. And that is more challenging. Liz, this is not a surprise. It's more challenging to wait on the Lord, seek him out in his word, seek him out in prayer, seek him out in the counsel of other believers than it is to just pick up the phone and ask somebody, what should we do? And I think maybe that's how Israel felt. Yeah. That they were like, okay, I do trust you, God, but it would be so much easier for us if we just had somebody who sat on a physical throne, who we could come to, like the two women come to Solomon, and Solomon's so wise when he figures out whose baby it really is. Like, that's easier. It's just easier. Yeah. And I can relate to that. It is harder for me to seek out the Lord and wait on the Lord and wait to be sure that I hear his voice, which I never really hear in an audible way. That's harder. Yeah. And so I can relate to that. I'm not mad at Israel for that. I know that was wrong of them, but I can relate to why they wanted that. And especially as they look around and they see the other countries who have this leadership, and they just they want the easy way out. They want more than what God has already given them, which, is wrong. Can you relate to that in any way? Wanting maybe more than what you can? I hate to ask it in a way that makes you look bad, but maybe you can just jump in so I don't have to ask it in a way that makes you feel bad about it.
I can completely relate. Yeah. I mean, I would certainly love to just be told what to do sometimes, and yet I'd also like to rebel against being told what to do sometimes as well. So there's that rub, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's easier, and then we're also here's my thing, is maybe I'm less accountable as well, is if I can just say, well, my leader told me to do A, B, or C, because then I'm doing what my leader told me to do, and they're actually more accountable than I am. So yeah, I mean, in my sinful nature, I find that it's easier to be the person who just goes, they can take care of it. Yes. And I really understand. In my home, there are some things where I'm like, hand it to your dad. Your dad can take care of it. Because I just, for whatever reason, he's better at it than I am. And so there's a lot of comfort in that, in not being the one that has to be answered to all the time.
Yes. But we wrestle with it. Like, we recognize that Christ leads us, and that the Holy Spirit leads us, and that we have all the equipping that we need. Maybe we recognize that in our head, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I mean, I can remember times in my life. One that sticks out right this minute is when our daughter, our youngest daughter, Sophia, was 3, and she needed eye surgery. And they basically said, this might work, this might not work. And it wasn't laser eye surgery. It was like scalpel surgery. And that was terrifying to make that decision as her parents, to say, oh, yeah, take a knife to hurt my baby girl's eyes. And they were pretty transparent about this might not work. It depends on whether her brain resets. It was a long story, but her eyes didn't work together. So she would cross one to negate the image, because we take for granted that our brain assimilates two inputs. We don't talk about that ever, right? But I learned a lot about it when Sophia's didn't work that way. And Sophia would cross her eye. And it would, monitor the other, but whichever one she didn't favor one necessarily. And so basically what they had to do was tighten the muscles so it made it harder for her to cross her eye. So they had to detach. I don't want to get into it anyway. So, but then they said, even when we do this, her brain might not reset. And so it may be that now we've taken away the ability for her to negate that one image, and for the rest of her life, she's dealing with two images. This was a very difficult decision for us to make. And I jokingly say we got 14 second opinions, but at the end of the day, we had to make the decision, and I just had no peace, because as a mom, mom and dad, you're on the hook. If this happens to her and you make this decision, you're on the hook. And I remember very clearly saying, God, just tell me what to do. I'll do whatever you tell me, but just tell me what to do. And I was mad. I was like, why are you not just telling me what to do? And I've told the story in other sessions, so I won't get much deeper into it. But I ended up, hearing from God out of His Word, and just meditating. I just kept going in to the Word, and I always say Psalm 139. That was where I went. It's where I often go, and I say to people, if you are looking for a word from God and you don't hear from Him, read Psalm 139. And if you don't hear from Him in there, read it again. Mm-hmm. It's one of your mom's favorites. Your mom and I talk about Psalm 139 all the time.
Half memorized, I think, because of that.
And so I was blessed by God to hear very clearly out of that scripture and have peace moving forward. But it's harder to get there. It's harder to get there, especially when you're in crisis and you feel like I just need someone to tell me what to do. Yeah. And so I can relate. I can relate to Israel. And I hope that's what we're trying to model here, is instead of pointing our fingers at Israel, we see that Israel is a mirror.